The Galactic Empire had conquered thousands of star systems. Entire civilizations had learned to fear the sound of an Imperial fleet dropping from hyperspace, the distinctive scream of reality tearing as star destroyers emerged to bring order through overwhelming force. But there was one thing the Empire had never encountered: a galaxy that did not fear them. A galaxy where entire planets were defended by towering war machines called BattleMechs, 60-ton instruments of warfare piloted by warriors who'd been fighting each other for centuries and knew no other life. A galaxy where political rivalries ran so deep that even the arrival of a Dark Lord from another universe couldn't immediately unite them. Darth Vader did not arrive here by choice. A hyperspace anomaly, unprecedented, impossible. The kind of spatial tear that shouldn't exist according to any Imperial science, had ripped the Executor from known space and deposited it elsewhere. When the most powerful warship in the Empire emerged from the anomaly, when Admiral Piet nervously reported that their star charts matched nothing in Imperial records, when every sensor reading suggested they were no longer in their own galaxy, Vader saw something he hadn't seen in years: opportunity. Admiral Firmus Piet stood on the bridge of the most powerful warship in the Imperial Navy, staring at sensor readings that made no sense. "Navigation," he said carefully, voice steady despite growing dread. "Confirm our position." The navigation officer, a 20-year veteran who'd served through the Clone Wars and never shown fear, looked up with eyes that betrayed uncertainty. "Sir, our charts don't match any known Imperial territory. We're not in the Outer Rim, not in wild space, not anywhere in mapped Imperial space." "Perhaps the anomaly damaged our systems," Piet suggested, grasping for rational explanation. "Run full diagnostics, compare against—" "We've run diagnostics 4 times, sir," the officer interrupted, protocol forgotten in his confusion. "The systems are functioning perfectly. It's the stars themselves that are wrong. The constellations don't match anything in our databases. This isn't just unknown territory. This is—" He stopped, struggling with implications. "This is somewhere else entirely." Piet turned toward the towering figure standing at the observation viewport, silhouetted against unfamiliar stars. Lord Vader hadn't moved since they'd emerged from the anomaly, hadn't spoken, hadn't even acknowledged the reports of system failures, crew panic, or the growing realization that they were impossibly far from home. He just stood, watching, breathing with mechanical rhythm that filled the bridge's silence. "Lord Vader," Piet approached carefully, maintaining respectful distance. "Our situation is unprecedented. We appear to have been displaced not just across space, but possibly across—" He hesitated, choosing words carefully. "Across dimensional boundaries. Our return to Imperial space may not be immediately possible." "I am aware," Vader replied, his voice carrying no emotion, no concern, no hint that being stranded in an unknown universe troubled him at all. Then Piet paused. "What are your orders, my lord?" Vader turned from the viewport, his mask's optical sensors fixing on Piet, with a tension that made the Admiral's spine straighten instinctively. "We survey this region, identify inhabited systems, assess their technological capabilities, and we determine—" He paused, not for dramatic effect, but for emphasis. whether they possess the means to facilitate our return. And if they don't, my lord? Then we will conquer them, Vader said simply, and use their resources to build what we require. The Emperor's will extends beyond one galaxy. If we have been displaced here, there must be purpose to it. We will fulfill that purpose. Piet absorbed this with the practiced calm of someone who'd served under Vader long enough to expect such responses. Sir, we should consider our position carefully. We're alone. One ship. However powerful the Executor may be, we're isolated from Imperial support. If we encounter hostile forces, then they will learn what it means to oppose the Empire, Vader interrupted. Admiral, you commanded fleets during the Clone Wars. You witnessed the Republic's expansion through superior technology and strategic dominance. Did isolation prevent conquest? Did limited resources stop the Republic from claiming new territories? No, my lord, but we had the Republic Navy, supply lines, reinforcements. We have the Executor, Vader replied. A superstar destroyer capable of reducing planetary civilizations to submission. We have 40,000 crew trained to Imperial standards. We have weapons technology likely superior to anything this region possesses. And we have, he gestured to himself, the Force. That is sufficient. Yes, my lord, Piet acknowledged, because disagreeing with Vader was career suicide at best, and actual suicide at worst. Begin long-range scans, Vader commanded. Identify the nearest inhabited systems. I want full analysis of their technological capabilities, military strength, and political structures. We will need intelligence before we move. Immediately, my lord, Piet turned to his crew. Sensors, begin wide-spectrum scanning. Communications, monitor all frequencies. Tactical, I want defensive posture until we understand what we're facing. The bridge crew moved with efficient precision, decades of Imperial training overriding their fear and uncertainty. Vader returned to the viewport, reaching out through the Force to sense this new galaxy, and felt life, abundant life. Billions of beings across thousands of systems, civilizations that had never known the Empire's order, populations that had never experienced Imperial authority, but also conflict, deep, pervasive conflict. The Force churned with centuries of warfare, with hatreds that transcended simple political disputes, with rivalries so ingrained that even Force sensitives couldn't sense individual animosity, just collective generational struggle. Interesting. My lord, the sensor officer called out, we're detecting inhabited systems, multiple clusters, advanced technology, fusion reactors, interstellar communications, what appears to be active military presence across numerous worlds. Military composition? Vader asked. Difficult to determine at this range. But sir, the officer pulled up enhanced scans. We're detecting weapons fire, multiple systems showing signs of active combat. These civilizations appear to be at war. With each other? Piet asked. Affirmative, sir. Preliminary analysis suggests multiple factions, political fragmentation, no unified government across the region. Vader turned from the viewport, and Piet could have sworn he sensed satisfaction in the Dark Lord's posture. Fragmented enemies, Vader said, are easier to conquer. They waste resources fighting each other. They cannot coordinate defense. They will view us not as unified threat, but as potential ally against their rivals. We can exploit this. Lord Vader, with respect, these factions may be fighting each other, but our arrival could unite them. A common external threat has historically failed to unite civilizations with deep-seated rivalries. Vader finished. The Clone Wars proved that. The Separatists and Republic never allied despite facing mutual threats. Pride and hatred run deeper than pragmatism. These factions will follow the same pattern. Piet had no response, because Vader was probably right. Political fragmentation had defined the Clone Wars, had enabled Palpatine's rise, had allowed the Empire to consolidate power while its enemies fought among themselves. Navigation, Vader commanded. Plot course to the nearest inhabited system. We will make contact, determine their capabilities, and decide whether they can assist our return or whether they will serve the Empire as new territory. Course plotted, my lord. Nearest system is approximately 6 light-years distant. Multiple planets, significant population, heavy military presence. Proceed, Vader ordered. The Executor turned, its massive engines igniting, pushing the 8-kilometer warship toward its first encounter with a universe that had never seen a Star Destroyer, had never witnessed the Empire's power. I had never learned to fear Darth Vader. That would change, soon. Piet stood at his station, watching the unfamiliar stars scroll past, and felt something he hadn't experienced since the Battle of Hoth. Uncertainty. They were alone, isolated, facing unknown forces in unknown territory, with no support and no clear path home. But they had Vader, and historically, that had been enough. Piet hoped, prayed to gods he didn't believe in, that it would be enough here too. Because if it wasn't, if this universe proved stronger than the Empire's greatest weapon, then they were all dead. Just a matter of time. The Executor jumped to lightspeed, crossing the void between stars, carrying Imperial authority into a galaxy that would soon learn what it meant to face the Dark Lord of the Sith. And in that galaxy, across the systems known as the Inner Sphere, in the territories controlled by great houses that had been fighting each other for 300 years, no one knew what was coming. No one could know, because how could they prepare for something their universe had never imagined? How could mech warriors who'd spent lifetimes mastering battlefield tactics against 60-ton war machines adapt to facing a Dark Lord who could crush metal with thought alone? How could political leaders who'd spent centuries navigating complex alliance networks respond to an enemy that didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, didn't care about their traditions or their pride? They couldn't, not at first, but they would learn, would adapt, would prove that even Darth Vader, conqueror of systems, destroyer of the Jedi, the Emperor's right hand, could meet resistance that even the Force couldn't overcome. The war for 2 universes was about to begin, and neither side knew how it would end. Periphery space, Tortuga system, Pirate Haven, independent territory. Captain Marcus Webb commanded the Salvage Rights, a modified Union-class dropship that had seen better decades. His fleet, 3 armed merchant vessels and 2 ancient aerospace fighters, patrolled Tortuga's outer system, watching for easy prey. They weren't prepared for what emerged from the jump point. Captain, his sensor operator's voice cracked with disbelief. Contact, massive contact, distance 200,000 kilometers. Sir, it's bigger than anything in our database. Webb pulled up the sensor feed and felt his blood go cold. The ship was 8 kilometers long. 8 kilometers. The largest warship in the Inner Sphere topped out at a kilometer. This thing dwarfed every vessel humanity had built since the fall of the Star League. Weapons? Webb asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Can't get accurate count. Hundreds of emplacements, maybe thousands. Sir, this can't be real. Nothing that size could function. The structural integrity alone. It's real, Webb interrupted, and it's heading toward us. Open a channel. Static, then clear transmission. Webb broadcast on all frequencies. Unidentified vessel. You have entered Tortuga territorial space. Identify yourself and state your intentions. This system is under the protection of... The transmission cut off. Not jammed, just ignored. Sir, they're not responding. Should we... The executor fired. A single turbo laser battery, one shot from weapons designed to reduce planetary shields to vapor. The salvage rights and its entire fleet ceased to exist in less than a second. No explosion, no debris field. Just instant conversion of matter to superheated plasma. Executor bridge. Target destroyed, my lord, the weapons officer reported with clinical precision. All contacts eliminated. Admiral Piet watched the display where 5 vessels had been moments ago. Lord Vader, we've just committed an act of war against pirates, Vader interrupted, his sensors having analyzed the destroyed ship's communications. Criminals operating outside legitimate authority. Their elimination serves as message to this region's governments. The Empire does not tolerate lawlessness. My lord, we don't know this region's political structure. Those ships may have had connections. Then their connections will learn to respect imperial power, Vader said. Continue toward the inhabited world. We will make formal contact with whatever government exists there. Piet wanted to protest, wanted to suggest caution, diplomacy, reconnaissance before engagement. But he'd served under Vader long enough to know the Dark Lord didn't do caution, he did conquest. And he'd just announced the Empire's presence to an entire universe. Tortuga Prime, surface. The planetary governor, a former pirate who'd bought his title through violence and bribes, watched orbital telemetry with shaking hands. 5 ships, gone instantly. Get me a HPG transmission to the nearest great house, he ordered, voice tight. Now, I don't care which one, Davion, Kurita, Steiner, whoever will listen. Tell them something has arrived, something beyond anything we've seen. And tell them... He paused, watching the massive ship descend toward low orbit. Tell them it's coming for all of us. The message went out across the hyperpulse generator network, spreading at the speed of commerce and communication across the Inner Sphere. And in the capitals of the 5 great houses, on New Avalon, Luthien, Tharkad, Cian, and Atreus, intelligence officers began receiving reports of an impossible ship that had destroyed an entire fleet with a single shot. Most dismissed it as periphery exaggeration. Some recognized it as genuine threat. All of them began preparing for contact with something their universe had never encountered. An empire that measured its conquests in galaxies. A Dark Lord who bent reality to his will. And a warship that made their greatest military achievements look like children's toys. The Inner Sphere's 300-year cycle of warfare and political intrigue was about to be interrupted by something far more dangerous than any great house rivalry, by Darth Vader. And the age of BattleMech supremacy was about to face its first real challenge. New Avalon, Federated Sun's capital palace of the First Prince. Prince Hans Davion stood in his intelligence briefing room, surrounded by holographic displays showing data that shouldn't exist. "Run it again," he commanded. The senior intelligence analyst, a woman who'd spent 30 years interpreting reconnaissance data and had never shown emotion, replayed the footage with hands that trembled slightly. Grainy sensor recordings from Tortuga showed the impossible ship. 8 kilometers of angular metal bristling with weapons, and the attack, a beam of coherent energy that made PPCs look like flashlights, striking the pirate fleet and converting it to plasma in microseconds. No dropship configuration matches this profile, the analyst reported. No known warship either, the energy signature alone. She pulled up technical analysis. Our best estimate puts that single shot at approximately 10 kilotons equivalent. That's more than some tactical nuclear weapons, and they fired it like it was nothing. No charge time, no cooldown, just instant annihilation. Theories? Hans asked, his tactical mind already running scenarios. Some kind of lost Star League technology, a warship that survived the succession wars intact. Perhaps Comstar has been hiding. Comstar doesn't have this, Hans interrupted. If they did, they'd have used it to enforce their monopoly decades ago. This is something else, something new, or... He paused, considering impossible options. Something from outside. Outside the Inner Sphere? The periphery doesn't have these capabilities. Outside the universe, Hans said quietly. Silence crashed over the briefing room. Sir, that's impossible? So is a ship that size. So is a weapon with that power output. So is destroying 5 vessels with a single shot that our sensors barely detected charging. Hans leaned forward, studying the hologram. We're intelligence officers. We deal in facts. The fact is, nothing in our known universe can do what that ship just did, which means either our understanding of technology is fundamentally flawed, or we're dealing with something that doesn't follow our rules. What are your orders, my lord? Hans considered carefully. Alert all Federated Suns border units. Full readiness, but no aggressive action. If this ship is what I think it is, if it represents technology beyond our comprehension, then attacking it would be suicide. We watch, we gather intelligence, and we prepare for the possibility that the succession wars just became the least of our problems. Luthian Draconis Combine Capital Coordinator's Palace Coordinator, Takashi Kurita, read the intelligence report 3 times, each reading making the implications clearer and more disturbing. His senior military advisor, Taisho Shotugama, stood at attention. My lord, House Davion has also received these reports. If they move to secure contact with this vessel first, if they gain access to its technology... They won't, Takashi interrupted. This ship destroyed a fleet without warning, without negotiation. That's not the action of beings who share technology. That's the action of conquerors. Then we should strike first. Deploy our fleet, destroy this vessel before it can threaten Combine territory. With what? Takashi asked. Did you see the power readings? That single shot output more energy than our largest warship can generate in sustained fire. And that ship, he gestured at the hologram, is covered in similar weapons. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Attacking it would be like attacking a sun. Glorious, suicidal, and ultimately pointless. Then what do you propose, Coordinator? We prepare, Takashi said. We fortify border systems. We position our best regiments where they can respond quickly, and we send diplomatic envoys. If this ship can be reasoned with, if its commanders understand honor, then perhaps we can avoid conflict. But if not, his voice hardened. If they come as conquerors, they will learn that the Draconis Combine has never bowed to threats. We survived the succession wars. We will survive this. Comstar headquarters, in Terra Hidden Sanctum of the Primus Primus. Julian Tiepolo stared at reports from across the Inner Sphere with growing dread. Comstar, the organization that controlled all interstellar communication, that held the secrets of Lost Tech, that had quietly manipulated the great houses for centuries, faced something they'd never anticipated, a force from outside their calculations. The ship is moving, his intelligence officer reported. It's left Tortuga. Current trajectory suggests it's heading toward the Federated Suns border, ETA to populated systems, approximately 48 hours. Have we made contact? Tiepolo asked. Attempts have been unsuccessful. The ship doesn't respond to HPGUI transmissions, doesn't acknowledge standard communication protocols. It's like, the officer struggled for comparison, like they're not even listening, like our technology is beneath their notice. Tiepolo felt cold certainty settle over him. Comstar's power came from controlling information, from being the sole keepers of advanced technology, from maintaining the balance between great houses by ensuring none became too powerful. This ship threatened all of that. If it shared its technology with one house, the balance would collapse. If it conquered territory, Comstar's neutrality would be meaningless. If it possessed weapons that made warships obsolete, the entire structure of Inner Sphere politics would shatter. Send word to all ROM agents, Tiepolo commanded, referring to Comstar's intelligence division. I want full surveillance on this vessel. Every transmission monitored, every action documented, and prepare the first circuit for emergency session. We need to decide, he paused, but choosing words carefully, whether this ship represents opportunity or apocalypse. Tharkad, Lyran Commonwealth Capital Archon Katrina Steiner, reviewed the same intelligence with her characteristic pragmatism. Military assessment, she commanded her chief of staff. Dire, my lady, if this ship is hostile, if it possesses the technology these reports suggest, we cannot stop it through conventional means. Our warships would be destroyed before achieving effective range. Our aerospace forces would be irrelevant, even our BattleMech regiments. The officer paused, struggling with the admission. Even our best regiments would be vulnerable to orbital bombardment of this magnitude. Then we don't fight it conventionally, Katrina replied. We fight it economically, politically, through alliance and coordination. Have any other houses reached out? Not officially, but intelligence suggests Hansa d'Avion is preparing similar assessments. The Combine is fortifying borders. House Liao is... The officer checked reports. Characteristically paranoid and aggressive. House Marek is mobilizing. Good, Katrina said. Fear will make them irrational. We'll be the voice of reason, the one offering coordination instead of panic. And when this ship reveals its intentions, when we understand what it wants, we'll be positioned to broker whatever agreement is necessary. And if it simply wants conquest, my lady, Katrina smiled without warmth, then we do what we've always done. We survive, we adapt, and we find its weakness. Everything has a weakness, even a ship that can destroy fleets with a single shot. We just need to find it before it destroys us. Executor Bridge. My lord, Admiral Piet reported, we're detecting increased military activity across multiple systems. Fleet movements, communications surges. It appears our arrival has been noted. Good, Vader replied, watching the tactical display. Let them prepare. Let them mobilize. Let them coordinate. It changes nothing. Sir, preliminary analysis suggests significant military forces. These aren't primitive civilizations. They possess fusion reactors, advanced metallurgy, organized military structures. If they unite against us, then they will learn the same lesson the Rebel Alliance learned, Vader interrupted. Unity without power is meaningless. We proceed as planned. We will make contact with the nearest government. We will determine if they can assist our return. And if they cannot, his breathing filled the silence. We will take what we need. The Executor continued its course, carrying Imperial authority toward its first official contact with Inner Sphere civilization. And across that civilization, in capital cities and military headquarters and intelligence offices, billions of beings prepared for something they couldn't fully comprehend. The arrival of Darth Vader, the man who'd brought galaxies to heel, who'd destroyed the Jedi Order, who'd conquered in the name of an emperor who ruled through fear. He was coming, and the Inner Sphere had 48 hours to decide. Would they negotiate? Would they fight? Or would they do what they'd done for 300 years, fight each other while the real threat approached unimpeded? History suggested the latter, and Vader was counting on it. Word of what happened on Mallory's world spread across the Inner Sphere faster than dropships could carry it. HPG transmissions burned through the network, carrying accounts that sounded like fiction. A man in black armor who crushed BattleMechs with gestures, who stopped weapons fire mid-flight, who walked through the fiercest combat without fear or hesitation. On New Avalon, Hansa Davion watched recovered battlefield footage in silence. See, the recording showed Vader approaching a rifleman, a mech specifically designed for anti-aircraft and long-range fire support that fired everything simultaneously: lasers, autocannons, missiles. The entire payload vanished 3 meters from the target, as if reality itself rejected their existence. Then the rifleman simply fell apart, its internal structure failing catastrophically from no visible cause. "This is impossible," Hansa's military advisor whispered. "No technology can do this. Not even Star League tech at its height. This is magic," Hans finished. "Or technology so advanced it appears as magic. Either way, it changes everything." He turned to his staff. "Send word to Katrina Steiner, Takashi Kurita, everyone. Tell them we need emergency summit. Tell them I'm invoking the Ares conventions for parley. Tell them if we don't coordinate response, we'll be conquered piecemeal." On Luthien, Coordinator Takashi Kurita reached the same conclusion. His finest regiments, warriors who'd trained since childhood, who embodied Bushido principles, who feared no death in service to the dragon, were sending reports of supernatural phenomena, of an enemy who defied every tactical principle, every understanding of warfare, every law of physics they knew. "We face a demon," one senior officer reported, "not metaphorically, literally. No human can do what this being does." Takashi didn't believe in demons, but he believed in threats that required unprecedented response. "Contact the other houses, all of them, even Liao. Tell them the Draconis Combine requests immediate parley, full military coordination, suspension of all hostilities between houses until this threat is neutralized." The message was unprecedented. The great houses hadn't cooperated meaningfully in 300 years. Centuries of blood feuds, territorial disputes, and political betrayals had created hatreds deeper than any external threat could overcome. Until now, because Vader wasn't conquering through superior numbers or better technology alone. He was conquering through something the Inner Sphere had no framework to understand: the Force. Every battle reinforced the same terrible lesson. Conventional warfare was insufficient against an enemy who could manipulate reality itself. On Mallory's world, Imperial occupation proceeded with brutal efficiency. Stormtroopers secured the manufacturing facilities. Engineers began analyzing BattleMech construction techniques, and Vader stood in the captured factory, watching through the Force as panic rippled across this fragmented civilization. Admiral Piet approached cautiously. "My lord, we're receiving multiple transmissions, diplomatic requests, offers of parley. They want to negotiate." "Let them negotiate among themselves first," Vader replied. "They need to achieve consensus before approaching us. That will take time, during which we secure more territory." "Sir, intelligence suggests they may be coordinating. Multiple houses making simultaneous diplomatic contact. If they unite their forces..." "They are warriors, Admiral, not diplomats. They've spent centuries fighting each other. That hatred doesn't vanish because one new threat appears. They'll argue, debate jurisdiction, compete for leadership. By the time they achieve coordination, we'll control enough territory to dictate terms." Piet wanted to argue, wanted to point out that desperation created strange alliances, that existential threats had historically unified even bitter enemies. But he'd learned not to question Vader's strategic assessments. The Dark Lord was rarely wrong about such things. And if he was wrong this time, if the Inner Sphere achieved unprecedented unity against Imperial invasion, then they were about to witness something even Darth Vader hadn't encountered in years: a truly unified resistance. Across the Inner Sphere, in capital cities and military headquarters and secret meeting chambers, the great houses prepared for something they'd never attempted: cooperation. Not alliance born of mutual benefit, not temporary ceasefire for tactical advantage, but genuine. The desperate coordination against an enemy that threatened them all equally. The mech warriors who'd spent lifetimes fighting each other were about to learn whether they could fight together, whether ancient rivalries could be set aside, whether the Inner Sphere could become something it had never been: united. Vader was counting on the answer being no. He was about to discover whether his assessment was correct, or whether he'd finally met a battlefield that even the Dark Lord of the Sith couldn't dominate alone. The summit took place on Outreach, a neutral world controlled by Wolf's Dragoons, the most elite mercenary unit in the Inner Sphere. For 300 years, the great houses had refused to meet like this. Pride, hatred, and political calculation had kept them divided through generations of war. Darth Vader changed that in 3 weeks. Hansa Davion arrived first, accompanied by minimal security and maximum skepticism. Katrina Steiner came next, her pragmatism overriding traditional Lyran caution. Takashi Kurita's arrival shocked everyone. The coordinator never left Luthien, yet here he stood, facing his greatest enemies in person. Even Chancellor Maximilian Liao attended, though his paranoia was evident in the way his eyes darted between the other leaders. And Captain General Janos Marek, representing the Free Worlds League, completed the unprecedented gathering. Jaime Wolf, commander of the Dragoons, stood at the center. You've all seen the reports. Mallory's world fell in 18 hours. Garrison destroyed. Production facilities captured intact. And the being leading this invasion. He pulled up holographic footage of Vader crushing a warhammer. Represents technology or power we don't understand. Not technology, Takashi said quietly. I've consulted with every scientist in the Combine. What this being does, stopping energy weapons, crushing armored targets through gesture, it defies known physics. Now, this is something else, something beyond our current understanding. Does it matter what we call it? Hans asked. The effect is the same. He's conquering our worlds, and conventional warfare isn't stopping him. Then we use unconventional warfare, Katrina replied. Coordinate our forces, share intelligence, strike simultaneously across multiple fronts, make occupation too costly to maintain. You're suggesting alliance, Maximilian said, suspicion dripping from every word. Between houses that have been killing each other for centuries. How long before one of you betrays the others? Before this coordination becomes excuse to advance territorial claims? About as long as it takes Vader to conquer all our territories separately, Hans shot back. Chancellor, your paranoia is legendary, but even you must see the mathematics. Divided, we fall one by one. United, we might survive. The Federated Suns lecturing me about unity, Maximilian laughed bitterly. Rich, coming from the house that spent decades trying to absorb Capellan worlds. Enough, Jaime Wolf interrupted. You can return to killing each other after we deal with the immediate threat. Right now, you have a choice. Coordinate or die separately. What's it going to be? Silence filled the chamber. 300 years of bloodshed. Families destroyed. Worlds burned. Grudges that transcended rational calculation. All of it stood between the great houses and the cooperation they needed. Takashi spoke first. The Draconis Combine will commit 3 RCT regiments to coordinated defense. We'll share intelligence on Imperial tactics, and will honor ceasefire with all houses for duration of this crisis. Katrina nodded. The Lyran Commonwealth agrees. Full military coordination, shared logistics, no territorial advancement against fellow houses, while the Empire threatens us all. Hans took longer to decide. His mind ran scenarios, calculated risks, weighed the possibility that this cooperation would be exploited. But the footage of Vader crushing mechs like toys played in his memory. The Federated Suns will coordinate, but I want formal treaty, written terms, clear definition of what happens after we drive this invasion back." "Agreed," Janos said. "The Free Worlds League will participate, pending League Parliament approval, which I'll secure within 48 hours. All eyes turned to Maximilian Liao. The Chancellor of the Capellan Confederation looked at each leader in turn, seeing the same calculation in their eyes: cooperate or perish. The Confederation will coordinate, but mark my words, the moment this threat is neutralized, old scores will be settled." "Noted," Hans replied dryly. "But first, we survive. Jaime, coordinate the details. I want combined task force operational within 1 week. Best regiments from each house. Unified command structure. And someone find out if this Vader can be killed. Because if he can't, then we find a way to make him leave." Katrina finished. "Make occupation so costly, so difficult, so resource-intensive that I decides this universe isn't worth conquering. He destroyed an entire fleet with 1 shot," Takashi reminded them. "Crushed our best mechs with gestures. What makes you think cost will deter him?" "Because," Hans said, pulling up strategic maps, "even gods can bleed. And once he bleeds, once his forces suffer real losses, he'll learn what we've known for 300 years. The Inner Sphere doesn't surrender, ever." The alliance was formed, fragile, temporary, built on necessity rather than trust. But it was enough. For now, Vader's campaign across the Inner Sphere proceeded with methodical brutality. Within 6 weeks of the Outreach Summit, Imperial forces had occupied 17 worlds, destroyed 43 regiments, and shattered the myth of BattleMech invincibility. The pattern was always the same. The Executor would arrive in orbit, its presence alone enough to trigger planetary evacuations. Vader would offer terms, submit to Imperial authority, maintain current government under Imperial oversight, provide resources and intelligence. Refusal meant orbital bombardment followed by ground invasion. Most worlds chose bombardment. The Inner Sphere didn't surrender. Hans Davion had been right about that. Mech warriors fought with suicidal determination, trading their lives for minor delays, small victories, anything to slow the Imperial advance. But determination without superior firepower was just elaborate suicide. On Hesperus II, the Lyran Commonwealth's primary mech production center, Katrina Steiner committed her best regiments to defense. 12 battalions of assault mechs, supported by aerospace fighters and fortified positions. The battle lasted 4 days. Vader personally led the final assault, walking through withering fire to reach the planetary governor's command center. When he emerged, Hesperus II was under Imperial control, its factories intact and already being retooled for Imperial production. Admiral Piet watched the casualty reports with growing concern. The Imperial losses were minimal compared to Defender casualties, but they were losses nonetheless. 3 AT-ATs destroyed, 47 stormtroopers killed, 2 TIE fighters downed by lucky shots. For an invasion force isolated from reinforcement, every loss mattered. "Lord Vader," Piet said carefully during one strategic briefing, "our forces are stretched across 17 systems. We're maintaining occupation with skeleton crews. If the enemy coordinates simultaneous uprisings, "They won't," Vader interrupted, studying tactical displays. "Their alliance is fragile, built on fear, not trust. They're still competing for position, still maneuvering for advantage. By the time they achieve genuine coordination, we'll control enough territory to make rebellion pointless." But Piet noticed something in the data that troubled him. Imperial victory margins were shrinking. Each battle took longer. Each world required more resources to pacify. The enemy was learning. On Northwind, Highlander regiments used terrain to neutralize Imperial air superiority, forcing ground combat where BattleMechs excelled. On Solaris 7, the game world's arena champions employed guerrilla tactics, striking supply convoys and melting into civilian populations. On Benjamin, Kurita forces demonstrated new anti-walker tactics, concentrated fire on leg joints, followed by immediate withdrawal before orbital retaliation could respond. Vader noticed it too. The Force showed him enemy commanders analyzing Imperial tactics, sharing intelligence across house boundaries, adapting faster than he'd anticipated. These weren't the fragmented warlords he'd expected. They were professional soldiers learning to fight an enemy unlike any they'd faced. "They're coordinating better than intelligence predicted," Piet observed, "sharing tactical data, responding to our advances with unified strategy. My lord, they're treating us as the primary threat, not each other." "Then we escalate," Vader replied. "Deploy the full Executor armament. Begin systematic orbital reduction of military targets. Show them the cost of resistance." The bombardment of Kalidasa demonstrated that cost. When the world's defenders refused Imperial terms, Vader ordered precision strikes on every military installation. And turbo laser batteries reached down from orbit with surgical accuracy, converting barracks, supply depots, and mech facilities into molten craters. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Kalidasa's military capacity was reduced to 0, but the propaganda value worked against the Empire. Footage of the bombardment spread across the HPG network, galvanizing resistance. Worlds that might have negotiated chose to fight. Mercenary units that had remained neutral joined House forces. Even pirate bands began targeting Imperial supply lines, driven more by hatred than payment. And in a secure facility on Outreach, Jamie Wolfe studied battle recordings with his best tactical minds, searching for patterns, weaknesses, anything that could be exploited. "He's powerful," Wolfe said, watching Vader crush another mech. "Maybe unstoppable in personal combat, but he's not omnipresent. He can't be everywhere at once. And that ship," he pointed at the Executor, "no, it's their only strategic asset. Destroy it and they're stranded, cut off from whatever empire they came from." "You're suggesting we target the Executor directly?" his second-in-command asked. "With what?" "It destroyed our best warships in seconds." "Not destroyed," Wolfe corrected. "We find a way to disable it, board it, turn their greatest strength into their greatest vulnerability." He smiled grimly. "And I know exactly who to ask for help. She's someone with access to technology even the great houses don't have." He activated a secure channel. "Get me Comstar. Tell them Wolfe's Dragoons request meeting with the Primus. Tell them we have a plan to end this invasion, but we'll need their help." The assault on the Executor required resources the Inner Sphere hadn't assembled since the fall of the Star League. Comstar provided intelligence from their ROM operatives, who'd been monitoring Imperial movements. The great houses contributed their remaining warships, ancient vessels maintained more through pride than strategic necessity, and Wolf's Dragoons coordinated the tactical planning, synthesizing 300 years of combined military experience into one desperate gambit. The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. Lure the Executor into engagement range with a false target, then hit it from multiple vectors simultaneously with everything the Inner Sphere could muster. Not to destroy it, the ship's firepower made that impossible, but to overwhelm its point defense, board it, and either capture or disable it from within. Hansa Davion committed the Davion Pride, the Federated Sun's flagship. Takashi Kurita sent the Horizon, despite his advisors' protests that losing the Combine's only operational warship would be catastrophic. Katrina Steiner provided the Invincible, knowing full well the Lyran people would never forgive her if it was destroyed. Even Maximilian Liao contributed the Zuri, though everyone suspected he'd positioned it to retreat at the first sign of defeat. The combined fleet numbered 23 warships, 400 aerospace fighters, and 50 specially modified dropships carrying elite boarding teams, best mech warriors from each house, trained for zero-gravity combat in powered armor, equipped with whatever Lost Tech Comstar could provide from secret caches. They assembled near Asta, a strategically insignificant world that Imperial forces had bypassed. Vader took the bait. The Executor jumped in system, prepared to add another easy conquest to his growing empire. Then the trap sprung. The warships emerged from behind Asta's moons, their weapons already firing. Naval autocannons and PPCs lit space with destructive energy. Aerospace fighters swarmed like angry hornets, firing missiles and lasers in coordinated strikes. And the boarding dropships, painted matte black for stealth, accelerated toward the Executor's hull, seeking docking points and vulnerable access hatches. On the Executor's bridge, Admiral Piet watched his tactical displays light up with hostile contacts. Lord Vader, we're tracking 23 capital ships, multiple fighter wings, boarding craft approaching from... They're everywhere, my lord. This is coordinated assault. They've committed everything. Vader stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, watching the approaching armada through the Force. He felt their determination, their desperation, their absolute conviction that this was their only chance. They were right. All batteries fire at will, Vader commanded calmly. Focus on capital ships first. Deploy TIE squadrons to intercept fighters and prepare boarding countermeasures. The Executor's weapons spoke with the voice of annihilation. Turbo laser batteries that could reduce planetary shields to vapor carved through warship armor like plasma through paper. The Davion Pride took 3 direct hits and broke apart, its reactor detonating in a flash that momentarily outshone Asta's sun. The G retreated immediately, exactly as everyone had predicted, leaving a gap in the formation. But the Inner Sphere fleet had learned from previous encounters. They didn't engage linearly. Ships used Asta's gravity well for cover, appearing and disappearing behind the planet's mass, firing when opportunity arose. denying the Executor clean shots. Aerospace fighters sacrificed themselves in suicide runs, crashing into point defense batteries to create gaps for following wings. Now, and the boarding dropships, 12 survived the initial approach, latched onto the Executor's hull like parasites beginning to cut through armor. Boarding teams have breached hull sections 14 through 19, Piet reported, deploying stormtrooper response teams. Inside the Executor's corridors, the most intense close-quarters combat the Inner Sphere had ever seen erupted. Mech warriors in powered armor faced stormtroopers in their iconic white plates. A blaster fire and autocannon rounds filled passages designed for routine maintenance. Warriors trained in BattleMech combat adapted to shipboard fighting with impressive speed, using zero gravity to achieve tactical positions, exploiting their knowledge of similar systems to target critical infrastructure. Vader felt them through the Force, hundreds of determined fighters spreading through his ship like infection, seeking the bridge, engineering anything that might cripple the vessel. He ignited his lightsaber. "Admiral, you have command. Deal with the external threat. I will handle the borders personally." Piet wanted to protest, wanted to say that the Dark Lord was too valuable to risk in corridor combat, but he'd seen Vader fight, knew that sending him against the boarding teams was the most devastating countermeasure available. The Dark Lord left the bridge, moving toward the nearest breach point, and the mech warriors about to face him had no idea what was coming. The boarding action lasted 4 hours. By the end, 70% of the assault teams were dead. The remaining warships had withdrawn to minimum safe distance, and the Executor's corridors were painted with evidence of Vader's efficiency. But the Inner Sphere had achieved something unprecedented. They'd hurt the Empire. 3 decks were vented to space. Reactor efficiency dropped 18% from battle damage. And most critically, the boarding teams had successfully sabotaged the hyperdrive motivator before Vader reached them. The Executor could maneuver, could fight, but couldn't jump to light speed until repairs were completed. Admiral Piet delivered the damage assessment with visible trepidation. "My lord, engineering estimates 3 weeks minimum for hyperdrive restoration. We're also seeing cascade failures in secondary systems. The enemy knew exactly where to strike. This wasn't random sabotage. They had intelligence on our ship's layout." Vader stood in a corridor still scarred from his personal intervention, his lightsaber deactivated but held ready. Around him lay the bodies of mech warriors who'd fought with desperate courage and died anyway. They had help, he said. Someone provided them detailed specifications, someone with access to Imperial technology. Or, he paused, considering, someone with similar design knowledge. "Admiral, to begin analysis of enemy tactics, I want to know if they've encountered our technology before." But Piet was focused on more immediate concerns. "Lord Vader, with the hyperdrive damaged, we can't retreat if the situation becomes untenable. We're committed to this campaign until repairs complete. If they launch another assault, then we ensure they lack the resources to launch anything," Vader interrupted. "They committed everything to this attack, lost multiple capital ships, sacrificed elite troops. Their alliance will fracture over who bears responsibility for the losses. We exploit that fracture." But Vader's assessment proved incorrect. The assault's partial success had the opposite effect. It unified the Inner Sphere further. For the first time, they'd proven the Empire could bleed, could be hurt, could be trapped. On Outreach, the Great House leaders reconvened, analyzing battle data with grim satisfaction. "We lost the Davion pride," Hance said. "But we proved the Executor is vulnerable. Now we change tactics. No more defending individual worlds. We evacuate civilians, fortify key positions, and force Vader to commit resources to occupation, make him spread thin." Across Imperial-occupied worlds, the guerrilla warfare Piet had feared began in earnest. Resistance cells equipped with weapons, Comstar suddenly made available from secret stockpiles, struck supply depots, assassinated Imperial administrators, sabotaged infrastructure the Empire needed functional. On Hesperus II, production that had been forcibly converted to Imperial purposes suffered mysterious accidents. On Northwind, an entire stormtrooper battalion vanished in the Highlands, picked off by Highlander scouts who knew every mountain pass. Vader responded with escalating brutality. Cities harboring resistance were subjected to orbital bombardment. Entire districts were reduced to rubble as examples. But for every resistance cell destroyed, 2 more formed. The Inner Sphere's population had spent 300 years at war. They knew occupation, knew resistance, knew how to make conquerors pay for every meter of ground. Imperial casualties mounted steadily, not catastrophically. Vader's forces still maintained tactical superiority, but persistently, death by 1,000 cuts. And with the hyperdrive disabled, there were no reinforcements coming. Every lost stormtrooper was irreplaceable. Every damaged walker was one less resource for future campaigns. Piet brought the casualty reports to Vader during a strategic review. "My lord, at current attrition rates, we'll lack sufficient forces to maintain occupation within 6 months. We need to consolidate, abandon peripheral territories, focus on defending core conquests until the hyperdrive is repaired." "No," Vader said flatly, "retreat signals weakness, invites further aggression. We maintain all occupied territories and continue expansion." "With what forces? We're at 60% strength across all units. The crew is exhausted. Equipment is degrading from constant combat. My lord, even the Executor has limits." Vader turned to face his admiral, and Piet felt the weight of the Dark Lord's attention like physical pressure. "You commanded forces during the Clone Wars. You witnessed the Republic's transformation into the Empire. Did we achieve galactic dominance through caution, through consolidating when resistance emerged, or through absolute commitment to victory regardless of cost? Through overwhelming numerical superiority and constant reinforcement?" Piet replied with uncharacteristic boldness. "Resources we don't have here. Lord Vader, I'm not suggesting surrender. I'm suggesting pragmatism. We're winning battles but losing the occupation. That needs to change or we'll be fighting forever." Vader considered this with rare patience, because deep down, in the part of himself he rarely acknowledged, he knew Piet was right. This wasn't conquest, this was quagmire, and for the first time in decades, Darth Vader faced a strategic problem the Force couldn't solve. The war for the Inner Sphere entered its 6th month with no resolution in sight. Imperial forces controlled 23 worlds, but control was theoretical at best. Each occupied planet required constant military presence to suppress resistance. Each supply convoy needed armed escort against guerrilla raids. Each day brought new casualties to forces that couldn't be reinforced. And in the Executor's engineering sections, repair crews worked around the clock on the hyperdrive, to their progress hampered by sabotage damage more extensive than initial assessments suggested. 3 weeks had become 6. 6 had become 12. The ship was trapped. Vader stood in his meditation chamber, reaching through the Force to sense the battlefield's scope. He felt the inner sphere's resistance, not weakening as occupied populations usually did, but hardening. Felt the alliance between great houses growing stronger through shared struggle. Felt something he hadn't experienced since facing the Rebel Alliance, an enemy that refused to break. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years crushing rebellion in his own galaxy, pursuing rebel forces across star systems, hunting them relentlessly. Now he was the invader facing coordinated resistance. The roles had reversed, and he was learning what the Empire had inflicted on others, a worthy war. That's what he'd thought when this campaign began, a conflict that challenged him, that required strategy and power in equal measure, that gave him purpose beyond serving as the Emperor's enforcer. He'd found it, but victory remained elusive. Admiral Piet entered the chamber with unusual urgency. "Lord Vader, we're receiving a transmission from someone claiming to represent the Great House Alliance. They're requesting formal parley, offering negotiations." "On what terms?" Vader asked. "They're proposing cessation of hostilities, Imperial withdrawal from occupied territories. In exchange," Piet paused, reading the message carefully, "they offer to assist with hyperdrive repairs using their best engineers and provide safe passage to the nearest jump point. They want us gone, but they're willing to help us leave." Vader considered this. In his own galaxy, such an offer would be weakness to exploit. Here it was pragmatic recognition that neither side could achieve decisive victory. The Inner Sphere couldn't destroy the Executor, but the Empire couldn't pacify their conquered territories. Stalemate. "What of their unity?" Vader asked. "Are the great houses maintaining coordination?" "Intelligence suggests yes, my lord. The common threat has," Piet chose words carefully, "has created unprecedented cooperation. They're sharing resources, coordinating strategy, even conducting joint operations. This alliance appears stable, at least for now." For now, that was the key. Vader knew political alliances built on external threats, knew they collapsed once the threat was neutralized. If he withdrew, the great houses would return to fighting each other within months. The cycle would resume. Their fragmentation would reassert itself. But that wasn't his concern anymore, because as Vader reached through the Force, he felt something unexpected. The Emperor's presence, distant, faint, but detectable across dimensional boundaries. Palpatine was searching for him, for his lost enforcer, for the weapon that had disappeared months ago. And the Force showed Vader a path. Not certain, not clear, but possible. The hyperspace anomaly that had brought him here, it was still active, still unstable, still offering potential transit back to his own universe. if he could reach it, if he could escape the Inner Sphere's forces long enough to make the jump, if he accepted that this conquest, this worthy war, had no victory condition worth pursuing. "Prepare the ship for immediate departure," Vader commanded. "All occupied worlds, begin phased withdrawal. Prioritize forces over territory. We're leaving." Piet stared, not quite believing what he'd heard. "My lord, we're abandoning the campaign?" "We're ending it," Vader corrected. "This universe has proven instructive, but it's not ours to conquer. The Emperor requires my presence, and pursuing endless occupation when strategic withdrawal is available." He paused. "That's not strategy. That's pride, and pride is a luxury I cannot afford." Over the following weeks, Imperial forces conducted the most organized military retreat the Inner Sphere had ever witnessed. Garrisons evacuated in good order. Equipment was destroyed rather than captured. And the Executor, still damaged but functional, positioned itself at the edge of known space, preparing to jump toward the anomaly coordinates Vader's navigators had located. The Great House Alliance, suspicious of Imperial intentions, shadowed the withdrawal with military forces, but they didn't attack, didn't risk restarting hostilities when their enemy was leaving voluntarily. On the day of departure, Vader stood on the Executor's bridge, looking at the Inner Sphere one final time. 23 worlds conquered, thousands of enemy combatants killed, months of warfare that had tested his tactical abilities more thoroughly than any campaign since the Clone Wars. And he'd failed to break them. He failed to impose Imperial authority on a civilization that valued freedom, their peculiar, fractious, competitive version of freedom, more than they valued peace. "Jump coordinates locked, my lord," the navigation officer reported. "The anomaly is unstable, but we've calculated optimal entry vector, probability of successful transit, 47%. "Proceed," Vader ordered. The Executor jumped, vanishing in a flash of impossible light that didn't quite match hyperspace transit. Sensors throughout the Inner Sphere tracked its departure, confirming what millions had prayed for. The Empire was gone. In the command center on Outreach, the Great House leaders watched the confirmation with exhausted relief. "He's gone," Hance said. "Actually gone." "For now," Takashi replied. "That anomaly remains. Others might come through. We need to monitor it, prepare for future incursions." "Agreed," Katrina said. "And we need to maintain this alliance. What we built facing the Empire, the coordination, the shared intelligence, the cooperation, we can't lose that. The succession wars have cost us enough. Maybe it's time for something different." "You're suggesting permanent alliance?" Maximilian asked skeptically. "Between houses that have been enemies for centuries?" "I'm suggesting that we just survived something worse than anything we've done to each other," Hance replied. "And we survived by working together. That has to mean something." The conversation would continue for months. The alliance would fracture and reform multiple times. Old hatreds would resurface, but the memory of standing united against impossible odds, of proving that cooperation could achieve what individual strength couldn't, that memory would endure. And somewhere in the void between universes, the Executor emerged from the anomaly battered but intact, returning to the Star Wars galaxy with its crew traumatized but alive. The Admiral Piet approached Vader as the familiar stars of Imperial space materialized on sensors. "Lord Vader, we've returned. Should I set course for Imperial Center? Report to the Emperor." Vader stood silent for a long moment, the mechanical breathing that defined him filling the bridge. In his mind, he replayed battles against BattleMechs, remembered the Inner Sphere's refusal to surrender, recalled the feeling of facing enemies who adapted, who learned, who coordinated despite centuries of mutual hatred. A worthy war. He'd found one and learned something he'd never expected. Even the Dark Lord of the Sith could meet a battlefield he couldn't dominate alone. "Set course," Vader confirmed. "And Admiral, ensure the encounter logs are complete. Everything we learned, every tactic they employed, every coordination strategy that made them effective." "My lord, if I may ask, why? We're not returning to that universe." "No," Vader agreed. "But the rebellion employs similar tactics. Coordination between fragmented cells, guerrilla warfare against occupation forces, refusal to accept defeat despite overwhelming odds." He turned to face Piet. "The Inner Sphere taught me something about fighting such enemies. Those lessons will serve the Empire well." The Executor jumped to lightspeed, carrying the Dark Lord back to his war. But Vader would remember the other war, the one where mech warriors faced impossible power without flinching, to where political enemies became allies, where a fragmented civilization proved that unity, however temporary, however reluctant, was stronger than any individual force. He would remember, and perhaps in the struggle against the rebellion that would define his future. Those memories would matter more than he knew. The war for two universes had ended. Both sides survived. Both sides changed. And both sides would carry the scars and lessons into whatever battles came next. The Inner Sphere would remember the Empire. The Empire would remember the Inner Sphere. And across dimensional boundaries that should never have been crossed, two civilizations that should never have met had taught each other what it meant to fight a worthy war,